What if I told you that the very thing you hate most about yourself could be the secret to unlocking everything you've ever wanted? That every moment of shame, every uncomfortable feeling you've tried to push down, every dark thought you've desperately hidden from the world isn't your weakness, but your greatest untapped power. I know it sounds impossible, maybe even dangerous, but stay with me, because what you're about to discover will completely flip everything you thought you knew about personal growth, success, and finding your true calling in life. Right now, as you're listening to this, there's an entire universe living inside you that you've never explored. A hidden realm that psychology legend Carl Jung called the shadow. And it's been quietly running your life from behind the scenes, influencing every decision you make, every relationship you form, and every dream you either chase or abandon. But here's where it gets really wild. This shadow isn't some evil force trying to destroy you. It's actually been trying to save you this entire time. And once you understand how to work with it instead of against it, you'll never look at your struggles the same way again. If you're ready to stop running from yourself and start running toward the most authentic, powerful version of who you can become, hit that like button right now. Because we're about to dive deep into territory most people are too scared to explore. And by the end of this journey, you'll have a roadmap not just for understanding your shadow, but for using it as your secret weapon for creating the life you actually want. Subscribe if you're serious about transformation, because this is just the beginning. Let me ask you something that might make you squirm a little. When was the last time you caught yourself having a thought that shocked you? Maybe it was a flash of anger at someone you love. Perhaps a moment of envy so intense it made you feel sick. Or maybe you found yourself fantasizing about a completely different life, one that goes against everything you tell people you believe in. Your first instinct was probably to push that thought away as quickly as possible, to pretend it never happened, to convince yourself that real you would never think such things. But what if I told you that in that uncomfortable moment, you actually caught a glimpse of your greatest hidden treasure? Carl Jung spent his entire career studying what he called the shadow, that part of our personality that contains everything we've decided is unacceptable about ourselves. But here's what most people get wrong about Jung's work. The shadow isn't just a dumping ground for our bad qualities. It's where we've hidden some of our most powerful gifts, our deepest wisdom, and yes, even our true purpose in life. Think about it this way. Every hero's journey and every great story follows the same pattern. Luke Skywalker had to face the darkness within himself before he could become a true Jedi. Batman had to embrace his fear and rage to become a force for justice. Even Jesus had to wrestle with temptation in the desert. The path to greatness always runs directly through the places we least want to go. And that's exactly where most people get stuck. They spend their entire lives trying to be good, which really means trying to be acceptable to others. They build this perfect image of who they think they should be, and then they exhaust themselves trying to live up to it. Meanwhile, all their real power is locked away in the basement of their consciousness, labeled "Do Not Touch." But what happens when you finally get brave enough to go into that basement? When you stop running from your uncomfortable feelings and start getting curious about them instead, that's when the magic happens. That's when you discover that your jealousy might actually be showing you what you really want. Your anger might be pointing you toward injustices you're meant to fight. Your shame might be protecting dreams that are so important to you, you're terrified of failing at them. Jung called this process individuation, becoming who you really are instead of who you think you should be. And he believed it was the most important work any human being could do, not just for themselves, but for the entire world. Because here's the thing that will blow your mind. When you stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be whole, you don't become more selfish. You become more compassionate. When you stop judging your own darkness, you stop judging everyone else's too. And when you integrate your shadow instead of fighting it, You become the kind of person who can hold space for all of human experience, the beautiful and the ugly, the light and the dark. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we can talk about transformation, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with, because the shadow doesn't just sit there passively waiting to be discovered. It's active. It's influencing your life right now in ways you probably haven't even realized. Have you ever had one of those moments where you reacted so strongly to something that you surprised yourself? Maybe someone cut you off in traffic and you flew into a rage that lasted for hours. Or perhaps you met someone at a party and instantly disliked them for reasons you couldn't explain. These aren't random events. They're your shadow trying to get your attention. Jung discovered that one of the primary ways the shadow shows up in our daily lives is through what he called projection. Essentially, we take the parts of ourselves that we can't accept and we see them in other people instead. Then we react emotionally to those people as if they're the problem. This is why certain people can trigger you so intensely. It's not really about them at all. It's about you recognizing something in them that you've disowned in yourself. The colleague who seems arrogant might be reflecting your own suppressed confidence. The friend who's always seeking attention might be showing you your own unmet need to be seen. The family member who can't seem to get their life together might be mirroring your own hidden chaos. And here's where it gets really interesting. Those people who irritate you most, they might actually be your greatest teachers. Because every time you feel triggered, you're being given a roadmap to a part of yourself that's been waiting to be reclaimed. Once Sarah understood this dynamic, everything changed. Instead of being angry with her sister, she became curious about her own needs. She started asking herself what she wanted instead of just focusing on what everyone else wanted. And ironically, this made her more giving, not less. Because now she was giving from a place of choice rather than compulsion. This is the paradox of shadow work. When you reclaim the parts of yourself you've been rejecting, you don't become worse, you become more balanced. You don't lose your values, you discover which values are actually yours versus which ones you adopted to fit in. But projection isn't the only way your shadow shows up. It also appears in your dreams, your fantasies, your slip-ups, and those moments when you feel like you're not being yourself. It shows up in the patterns that keep repeating in your life, the same types of relationship problems, the same self-sabotaging behaviors, the same fears that seem to follow you everywhere. Jung believed that the unconscious mind is constantly trying to balance the conscious mind. So if you've built an identity around being nice, your shadow will contain your capacity for healthy anger. If you've built an identity around being rational, your shadow will hold your emotional and intuitive wisdom. If you've built an identity around being humble, your shadow will contain your natural confidence and charisma. The problem is, these suppressed qualities don't just disappear. They go underground, where they can actually cause more problems than if you had just owned them in the first place. Your suppressed anger might come out as passive aggressiveness or sudden explosions. Your suppressed confidence might manifest as arrogance or overcompensation. Your suppressed emotions might show up as anxiety, depression, or physical symptoms. This is why Jung said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Because what irritates us is usually what we've split off from our own identity. And what we've split off is usually exactly what we need to become whole. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like a lot of psychological mumbo-jumbo. How does any of this actually help me in real life? And that's a fair question, because understanding the concept of the shadow is one thing. Learning how to work with it practically is something else entirely. The first step is developing what Jung called shadow consciousness, the ability to recognize when your shadow is running the show. This requires a level of self-honesty that can be uncomfortable at first. You have to be willing to admit that maybe you're not always the victim in your story. Maybe that person who triggered you isn't the real problem. Maybe your reaction is telling you something important about yourself. One practical way to start developing this awareness is to pay attention to your emotional reactions throughout the day. When you feel triggered by something, when you have a reaction that seems bigger than the situation warrants, pause and ask yourself, what is this reaction telling me about myself? What part of me is this person or situation reflecting back to me? This isn't about blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong. It's about taking responsibility for your internal experience so you can actually do something about it. Because the truth is, you can't control what other people do, but you can control how you respond. And when you understand that your responses are often driven by unconscious projections, you suddenly have a lot more power to choose different responses. But recognition is just the beginning. The real work happens when you start to dialogue with your shadow instead of fighting it. Jung often encouraged his patients to imagine their shadow as a separate person and to have conversations with it. This might sound strange, but it's actually a powerful way to externalize and understand parts of yourself that have been hidden. You can do this through journaling, meditation, or even just internal dialogue. The key is to approach your shadow with curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of, why do I always do this? Try, what are you trying to tell me? What do you need? How are you trying to protect me? Because here's something crucial that most people miss. Your shadow isn't evil. It's not trying to ruin your life. In most cases, the qualities you've pushed into your shadow were originally adaptive responses to difficult situations. Maybe you learned to suppress your anger because expressing it wasn't safe in your family. Maybe you pushed down your confidence because being too big led to rejection. Maybe you disowned your neediness because you learned that being self-sufficient was the only way to get love. Your shadow often contains the parts of you that were trying to protect you or help you survive. The problem is that these protective mechanisms can become outdated. What helped you survive as a child might be limiting you as an adult. And because these patterns are unconscious, you keep repeating them even when they no longer serve you. This is where shadow work becomes deeply healing. Because when you understand the original protective function of your shadow qualities, you can honor them while also updating them for your current life. You can reclaim your anger as healthy boundaries. You can reclaim your confidence as authentic self-expression. You can reclaim your neediness as healthy interdependence. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Jung believed that the shadow doesn't just contain troublesome qualities. It also contains what he called gold, positive qualities that you've disowned because they didn't fit with your self-image, or because expressing them seemed too risky. Maybe you've disowned your creativity because you were told it was impractical. Maybe you've pushed down your leadership abilities because being visible felt dangerous. Maybe you've suppressed your spiritual nature because it didn't fit with your rational worldview. This golden shadow often contains some of your greatest gifts, the very qualities that could help you fulfill your purpose in life. I worked with a client named Marcus who had built his whole identity around being logical and rational. He was an engineer, prided himself on being practical, and looked down on people he considered too emotional. But in his shadow work, he discovered an incredible capacity for empathy and emotional intelligence that he had completely disowned. Once he started integrating these qualities, his relationships improved dramatically, his leadership abilities emerged, and he found himself drawn to mentoring younger engineers, something that brought him more fulfillment than any technical achievement ever had. This is the real treasure of shadow work. It's not just about fixing your problems. It's about reclaiming parts of yourself that contain incredible gifts. It's about becoming more whole, more authentic, and more aligned with who you really are. And when you become more aligned with who you really are, something magical happens. Your purpose starts to emerge naturally. not as something you have to figure out or discover, but as something that flows organically from your integrated self. Think about the people you most admire, the ones who seem to have found their calling in life. What they all have in common is authenticity. They're not trying to be someone else. They're not hiding parts of themselves. They've somehow learned to embrace both their light and their darkness, and they've channeled all of that energy into something meaningful. This is what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about integrating all the different parts of yourself, including the parts you've been taught to reject, into a unified, authentic expression of who you are. But how do you actually do this integration work in practice? How do you take these insights and turn them into real transformation in your daily life? The first step is what I call shadow mapping, becoming aware of your personal shadow patterns. Start by paying attention to your triggers. What kinds of people, situations, or behaviors consistently upset you? Make a list. Then, for each trigger, ask yourself, how might this quality exist in me? When have I acted this way, even in small ways? What would it look like to own this quality instead of rejecting it? This isn't about excusing bad behavior or becoming someone you don't want to be. It's about recognizing that human beings are complex, and you contain multitudes. The goal is to become conscious of all your different aspects so you can choose how to express them rather than having them leak out unconsciously. Next, pay attention to your dreams. Jung considered dreams to be the royal road to the unconscious, and shadow figures often appear in dreams as people who embody qualities you've disowned. If you have a dream about being chased by someone scary, ask yourself what that scary person might represent about yourself. If you dream about someone you admire, consider what qualities they embody that you might be ready to reclaim. Another powerful practice is what Jung called active imagination, deliberately engaging with your shadow through creative expression. This could be writing, drawing, dancing, or any other creative outlet. The key is to let your unconscious mind express itself without censoring or judging what comes up. Often, shadow qualities will emerge in creative work before they emerge in conscious awareness. You can also work with your shadow through body awareness. Jung recognized that we don't just suppress psychological qualities, we suppress them physically as well. That chronic tension in your shoulders might be holding suppressed anger. That tight feeling in your chest might be containing grief you haven't processed. That knot in your stomach might be holding anxiety about parts of yourself you haven't accepted. Practices like yoga, massage, breathwork, or other forms of somatic therapy can help you access and release emotions and qualities that have been stored in your body. Sometimes you have to feel your shadow before you can think about it. But perhaps the most powerful tool for shadow work is relationship, because other people are constantly mirroring our unconscious patterns back to us. Your romantic partner, your family members, your friends, even your enemies, they're all reflecting different aspects of your psyche. This doesn't mean that every conflict is about projection. Sometimes people really are behaving badly, and sometimes you need to set boundaries or remove yourself from toxic situations. But it does mean that every relationship can teach you something about yourself if you're willing to look. Start paying attention to the patterns in your relationships. Do you consistently attract partners who are emotionally unavailable? Maybe there's something in you that's afraid of true intimacy. Do you find yourself in friendships where you always end up feeling used? Maybe there's something in you that doesn't believe you're worthy of reciprocal care. Do you have conflicts with authority figures? Maybe there's something in you that has difficulty with your own power. These patterns aren't random. They're your psyche's way of bringing unconscious material into consciousness so it can be healed and integrated. One of my favorite examples of this comes from a client named Jennifer, who kept attracting partners who would start out wonderfully attentive, and then gradually become controlling and possessive. She saw herself as the victim in these relationships, and in many ways, she was dealing with genuinely unhealthy behavior from others. But when we started exploring her shadow, Jennifer discovered that she had disowned her own capacity for jealousy and possessiveness. She had built her identity around being the cool girlfriend who never got jealous or needy, but those disowned qualities were unconsciously attracting partners who would act them out for her. Once Jennifer started owning her own capacity for jealousy, not acting it out destructively, but acknowledging it as a normal human emotion that contained important information about her values and needs, she stopped attracting possessive partners. Instead, she started attracting people who could be both independent and committed, both self-sufficient and emotionally available. This is the paradox of shadow work in relationships. When you own your difficult qualities, you stop unconsciously attracting people who will act them out for you. When you integrate your disowned aspects, you become capable of being in relationship with more integrated people. But shadow work isn't just about fixing your problems or improving your relationships, as important as those things are. It's about discovering your unique gifts and your purpose in life. Because often, the qualities you've pushed into your shadow are exactly the qualities the world needs you to express. Think about some of the most impactful people in history. Martin Luther King Jr. channeled his anger at injustice into a movement that changed the world. Frida Kahlo transformed her physical and emotional pain into art that still moves people decades later. Gandhi used his capacity for righteous indignation to fuel his commitment to nonviolent resistance. These people didn't become great by being perfect. They became great by integrating their full humanity, their light and their shadow, into purposeful action. Your shadow contains not just the qualities you've rejected, but often the very qualities that could make your unique contribution to the world. Maybe your suppressed anger is actually passion waiting to be channeled into meaningful work. Maybe your disowned selfishness is actually healthy self-advocacy that could inspire others to value themselves more. Maybe your hidden grandiosity is actually a vision of what you could become if you stepped fully into your power. The key is learning to express these shadow qualities in conscious, constructive ways rather than unconscious, destructive ones. This is what Jung meant by integration. It's not about acting out every impulse or becoming someone you don't want to be. It's about becoming conscious of all your different aspects so you can choose how to express your full humanity. And here's what's really beautiful about this process. The more you integrate your shadow, the more compassionate you become, not just toward yourself, but toward everyone. Because when you stop trying to be perfect, you stop expecting perfection from others. When you own your capacity for jealousy, anger, fear, and selfishness, you can hold space for those qualities in others without being triggered or judgmental. This is how shadow work contributes to collective healing. Jung believed that every individual who does the work of integration contributes to the consciousness of the entire human species. When you stop projecting your unconscious patterns onto others, you reduce the amount of unconscious reactivity in the world. When you take responsibility for your own healing, you free others from having to carry your projections. But perhaps most importantly, when you become willing to face your own darkness, you become capable of holding space for others to face theirs. You become someone who can say, "I see your struggle because I know my own. I accept your humanity because I've learned to accept mine." This is the ultimate gift of shadow work. It doesn't just transform your individual life, though it absolutely does that. It transforms your capacity to contribute to the world. Because the world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more whole people. It needs people who have done the work of integration and can therefore help others do the same. And this brings us to perhaps the most profound insight of all. Jung believed that the shadow doesn't just contain personal unconscious material. It also contains what he called archetypal energies, universal patterns that exist in the collective unconscious of humanity. When you do shadow work, you're not just reclaiming your personal disowned qualities. You're also connecting with primal energies that have been part of human experience since the beginning of time. The warrior energy that knows how to fight for what matters. The magician energy that can transform and create. The lover energy that can connect deeply with life. The sovereign energy that can lead with wisdom and authority. These archetypal energies exist in everyone, but they often get pushed into the shadow because our culture doesn't have healthy containers for them. We're afraid of our warrior energy because we've seen it expressed as violence. We're afraid of our magician energy because we've been taught to be rational and practical. We're afraid of our lover energy because we've learned that passion is dangerous. We're afraid of our sovereign energy because we've been taught that power corrupts. But these energies aren't inherently destructive. They only become destructive when they're unconscious and unintegrated. When you bring them into consciousness and learn to express them in healthy ways, they become incredible sources of strength, creativity, and purpose. The warrior energy becomes the courage to stand up for your values and protect what you love. The magician energy becomes the ability to create and transform in service of something greater than yourself. The lover energy becomes the capacity for deep connection, passion, and aliveness. The sovereign energy becomes authentic leadership and the ability to create positive change in the world. This is why shadow work is so much more than just personal therapy. It's about reclaiming the full spectrum of human potential. It's about becoming the kind of person who can channel primal energies in service of love, truth, and healing. And this is where your individual shadow work connects with your larger purpose in life. Because your unique combination of gifts, wounds, and experiences has created a unique shadow configuration. The specific ways you've disowned parts of yourself, the specific archetypal energies you've suppressed, the specific gold you've buried, all of this creates a unique signature that only you can express. When you do the work of integration, you don't just become a healthier version of who you were. You become who you were always meant to be. You step into your unique purpose not by figuring it out intellectually, but by reclaiming all the parts of yourself that purpose needs to express itself through. This is what Jung meant when he said that individuation is both a personal and a transpersonal process. It's personal because it's about becoming who you uniquely are, but it's transpersonal because who you uniquely are is meant to serve something larger than yourself. Your shadow contains not just your personal healing journey, but also your unique contribution to the healing of the world. The specific ways you've been wounded and the specific ways you've grown in response to those wounds creates a unique medicine that only you can offer. Maybe your journey through depression gives you the ability to sit with others in their darkness without trying to fix them. Maybe your recovery from addiction allows you to help others find freedom from their own compulsions. Maybe your healing from relationship trauma helps you create the kind of love that transforms everyone it touches. Or maybe your gifts are less obvious but equally important. Maybe your journey through anxiety teaches you to slow down and be present in a world that's constantly rushing. Maybe your experience with feeling like an outsider helps you create spaces where other outsiders can belong. Maybe your struggle with perfectionism allows you to model self-compassion for others who are trapped in the same patterns. The point is, your shadow isn't just personal baggage to be cleared away. It's raw material to be transformed into something beautiful and useful. It's compost that can fertilize the garden of your purpose. But this transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires what Jung called conscious suffering, the willingness to feel your pain fully rather than numbing it, avoiding it, or projecting it onto others. It requires the courage to face the parts of yourself you've been running from. It requires the patience to sit with discomfort while new patterns of being emerge. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of shadow work. Our culture teaches us to avoid discomfort at all costs. We're constantly offered distractions, substances, and strategies to help us feel better quickly. But Jung understood that some kinds of suffering are necessary for growth. Not the unconscious suffering that comes from being a victim of your own patterns, but the conscious suffering that comes from choosing to grow beyond them. This conscious suffering isn't about punishing yourself or dwelling in negativity. It's about being willing to feel your feelings fully so they can move through you and transform. It's about being willing to sit with uncertainty while old identities dissolve and new ones emerge. It's about being willing to look foolish or imperfect while you practice new ways of being. And here's what's incredible. When you're willing to do this work, when you're willing to face your shadow and integrate it consciously, you discover that you're capable of so much more than you ever imagined. You discover reserves of strength, creativity, and love that you didn't know you had. You discover that the very things that made you feel broken were actually making you more whole. This is the ultimate promise of shadow work. Not that you'll become perfect, but that you'll become complete. Not that you'll never struggle again, but that you'll struggle consciously in service of growth rather than unconsciously in service of old patterns. Not that you'll never feel pain, but that you'll be able to transform your pain into wisdom that can serve others. And when you reach this level of integration, something magical happens. Your life starts to feel like a work of art. Not because everything is beautiful or easy, but because everything, even the difficult parts, contributes to a larger picture that has meaning and purpose. You begin to see your struggles not as random misfortunes, but as necessary ingredients in your unique recipe for growth. You begin to see your difficult relationships not as failures, but as opportunities for healing and learning. You begin to see your painful emotions not as problems to be solved, but as messengers bringing important information. This shift in perspective is perhaps the greatest gift of shadow work. Because when you can see your entire life experience, including the parts you wish you could change, as meaningful and necessary, you develop what Jung called amor fati, love of fate. You develop the ability to say yes to your life exactly as it has unfolded, not because it's been perfect, but because it's been perfectly designed to create the unique person you're meant to become. And from this place of acceptance and integration, your purpose naturally emerges. Because purpose isn't something you figure out with your mind. It's something you embody with your whole being. It's what happens when all the different parts of yourself, light and shadow, wounded and healed, human and divine, come together in unique service to life. This is why Jung believed that individuation was both the goal and the method of human development. The goal is to become who you really are. The method is to embrace everything you've experienced as necessary for that becoming. And this is why shadow work is ultimately not about fixing yourself, but about loving yourself. Not about becoming someone different, but about becoming more fully who you already are. Not about transcending your humanity, but about embracing it so completely that it becomes a vehicle for something sacred. As we come to the end of this exploration, I want to leave you with a challenge and an invitation. The challenge is this: for the next week, pay attention to your triggers. Notice when you react strongly to someone or something, and instead of immediately justifying your reaction or blaming the other person, ask yourself, what is this showing me about myself? What part of my shadow is being activated here? The invitation is this: start a dialogue with your shadow. You can do this through journaling, meditation, or simply internal conversation. Approach the parts of yourself you've been avoiding with curiosity rather than judgment. Ask them what they need, what they're trying to protect, what gifts they might be hiding. Your shadow isn't your enemy, it's your ally. It's been waiting patiently for you to be ready to receive its gifts. And when you finally do open your arms to embrace all of yourself, the light and the dark, the noble and the petty, the strong and the vulnerable, you'll discover that you've been whole all along. You'll discover that your struggles haven't been random misfortunes but necessary initiations. Your wounds haven't been evidence of your brokenness, but invitations to your wholeness. Your darkness hasn't been proof of your unworthiness, but the raw material from which your unique light can shine. This is the ultimate message of Carl Jung's work on the shadow. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be complete. You are not here to have it all figured out. You are here to embrace the mystery of being fully human. You are not here to transcend your struggles. You are here to transform them into wisdom that can serve the healing of the world. The world doesn't need another perfect person. It needs you with all your struggles and gifts, wounds and wisdom, darkness and light. It needs your unique medicine, your specific way of being human, your particular combination of brokenness and beauty. Your shadow has been preparing you for this moment, the moment when you stop trying to be someone else and start being magnificently, courageously, authentically yourself. The moment when you realize that everything you've experienced has been perfectly designed to create the person the world needs you to be. So what will you choose? Will you continue fighting the parts of yourself that feel unacceptable? Will you keep trying to be perfect instead of complete? Will you keep waiting for permission to be fully yourself? Or will you take Jung's invitation to heart and begin the journey of individuation, the journey of becoming who you really are? Will you have the courage to face your shadow, embrace your wholeness, and step into the fullness of your purpose? The choice is yours, but know this, your shadow is ready when you are. It's been waiting for this conversation. It's been preparing gifts that only you can give. It's been holding space for the person you're capable of becoming. All you have to do is say yes. Yes to your complexity. Yes to your humanity. Yes to the terrifying and beautiful process of becoming whole. Your true life is waiting. Your real purpose is calling. Your integrated self is ready to emerge. The question is, are you ready to answer? If this message has sparked something in you, if you feel called to begin this journey of integration and authenticity, let me know in the comments below. Share what resonated most deeply with you. Share what parts of your shadow you're ready to explore. Share what gifts you suspect might be waiting in your darkness. And if you want to continue this conversation, if you want more tools and insights for doing this sacred work of becoming whole, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because shadow work isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong journey of discovery, integration, and transformation. Together, we can create a world where people are free to be fully human. Where darkness is transformed into light not by rejecting it but by embracing it. Where everyone has permission to be beautifully, messily, authentically themselves. Your shadow is waiting. Your wholeness is calling. Your purpose is emerging. Are you ready to begin?